Just check out this tomato. This is one of my favourite varieties, Oxheart. Well, I've taken my eye off these climbing beans for a few days and they're getting slightly on the big side. I've got the perfect recipe for the chunky chaps. That is a pretty good harvest to take into the kitchen. I'm excited. Welcome back to my River Cottage seasonal recipes for ZOE. And although it's not the sunniest day of the year, all these fabulous ingredients are made of sunshine, so it's right here in the kitchen. And I've got 4 fantastic recipes coming up, starting with one of the best things you can ever do with courgettes. Then I'm going to take those sun-soaked tomatoes and make a big salad with much, much more, and I'll finish up with a couple of fabulous ferments. Now, these slightly overgrown green beans are going to go in this bowl here, which will start accumulating ingredients for my final ferment. Meanwhile, let's start prepping these incredible courgettes. This is a ZOE flavoured courgette, by the way. But just that combination in the pan, the green and the yellow together, it just looks so stunning. But it isn't just that they look great. As far as I'm concerned, having 2 different colours of courgettes means you can count 2 separate vegetables towards your 30 plants. I mean, the yellow skin and the green skin, they're definitely going to have slightly different polyphenols in them, and that's going to give your gut a really good boost. I want to slice these courgettes as thinly as possible, really. Think 10p piece thickness or even thinner. So there's another super easy, lazy way to do that, and that's with a box grater. These little nubbly end bits are left whether I'm slicing with the knife or the grater, but I'm not going to waste them. They're going to go in the bowl along with the green beans to be part of my fabulous final ferment. I'm going to cook the courgettes in 2 different oils to get the benefit of 2 different plants. Cold pressed British rapeseed oil and extra virgin olive oil from Greece. I'm being quite generous with these oils because they're what's going to give this courgette dish a lovely creaminess. This is actually a variety called Rondo. No prizes for guessing what that means in Italian. I'm going to cook these courgettes slowly, and they're going to let out a lot of their moisture and cook down almost to a rough puree, so they end up super creamy. And then I'm going to add some things to make them really delicious. As those lovely courgettes start cooking down, I'm going to start thinking about building up the flavours with garlic. It's also good for releasing one of the key natural plant chemicals in garlic, which is allicin. The science shows that if we actually let the grated garlic stand for 5 or 10 minutes before we put it in, it helps release the allicin and it's taken up better in the dish that you're cooking. So that's what I do these days. And no surprises where these little nubbly ends of garlic are going to end up in my ferment bowl. Also a good time to get the first pinch of salt in, as that's going to help to draw the moisture out of the courgettes. I want these courgettes to cook nice and slow without browning at all. It's time to move on to the next aromatic ingredient, which is lemon. The zest goes in now so that it has time to release those complex aromatics. The juice I'll add later, a bit more judiciously. It's important to stir them or toss them regularly so that they cook down and break down evenly. But it is going to take a good 15 or 20 minutes to get them as tender and creamy as I want. This is a good time to toast a few seeds, which will be a nice crunchy sprinkle over the finished courgettes. And this mix is pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds and hemp seeds, packing a protein punch and lots of lovely seed oils too. See some good colour on them. I don't like to over toast them, just to bring up those lovely nutty flavours. I think we're good. I'm just going to pick the soft leaves off the tougher stalks. First the mint, then a little bit of parsley. Those amazing pungent aromatic flavours that they bring to dishes are also an indication that they're really high in polyphenols, so they're great for your gut. And my top tip for chopping herbs is don't keep chopping till you've got a kind of herby dust. Keep a little bit of texture. Like so many great things, one of the nicest ways to serve these courgettes is on toast. The slow fermentation using natural wild yeasts that you find in sourdough makes it easier to digest. I'm going to toast these and then they'll be ready for the courgettes. This is so luscious now. I'm going to finish the flavourings and the seasonings here on the board. I don't actually want to eat this piping hot. It's more delicious and all those flavours register more richly if you eat it just slightly warm or at room temperature. Could do with another little pinch of salt to finish. A twist of pepper, it hasn't had any yet. My gorgeous herbs. Now the lemon zest is already in there and tasting brilliant. I'm going to put some juice in now too, just to finish it off. Give it another stir so it all comes together. Still a bit hot, but oh my gosh, that is sensational. Oh, the lemon and the herbs have just lifted that to a heavenly state. It's so good. Toasts are ready to go. Just a very light rub of raw garlic. You just whisper it over the toast, otherwise it gets too garlicky. A trickle of oil. Of all the things I've cooked from the garden so far this summer, I'm about as excited about this as any of them. It's just such a gorgeous dish. You can literally toss this with your favourite pasta, maybe just a little spoonful of cream or creme fraiche and a fine grating of Parmesan. And to finish off, a final sprinkle, toasted seeds. These are now fully loaded for maximum taste and goodness. The next dish I want to share with you is really a celebration of these wonderful tomatoes, the big beefy ones and the lovely little cherries. They're so sweet and so ripe. And it's actually a variation on the classic Greek salad, tomatoes, cucumber, olives, a bit of feta. Next up, the smiley cucumber. Seems a shame to chop it in half, but it's got to happen sooner or later. This is such a fine specimen, I can hardly bear to cut it up. And they're rich in our beloved polyphenols, in this case, a very useful one called lycopene, which is really good at helping to protect our skin from the sun. As with all fruits and vegetables, having different colours, different varieties, you're always introducing slightly different plant chemicals. So you know that by growing or buying different varieties, you're onto a good thing. And the colour is just a really good indicator that you've got something a little bit different. Now the cherries. I love these little purpley dark ones. They're called black opal. And these orange ones are sun gold, famously one of the sweetest tomatoes you can grow. It's time for the surprise ingredient, the very first plums of the summer. They're only just ripe, still a little bit on the tart side. They're going in with the tomatoes, a similar but different sweet and sour flavour in amongst the tomatoes. They'll just pop off like little flavour bombs. It's quite a playful contrast. Now for the thing that's going to make this dish a little bit more substantial. I've got some puy lentils already pre-cooked. In fact, it's not at all unusual for me to have a bunch of lentils in the fridge, standing by, waiting to be used for all sorts of things. And of course, some fibre too. Definitely a good addition. You can certainly use tinned lentils or tinned beans if you prefer, but it's going to be a nice texture and a little bit of contrast as well as some pulsy goodness. This is a good time to dress the dish, get some seasoning in there, oil, a little bit of vinegar. You could use cider vinegar, wine vinegar. I'm just putting a few drops of balsamic in here. Just a little pinch of salt to bring out the juices of the tomatoes. Pepper too at this point. It's really the juices running out of the tomatoes and the plums that are also going to help build up that dressing. What we need to put in is the salty, savoury elements. And I'm going to start with a scattering of these lovely Kalamata olives. They've been stoned and ripped in half. This is really seasoning the dish as well as adding a lovely bit of cheesy goodness. Now you could go for a milder cheese. If salty feta isn't your thing, you could use some mozzarella here. Would also work really well, or even a bit of ricotta. Basil just wafting up from the dish now. It's really incredible. Not strictly necessary, but I can't resist just a little bit of mint because it goes so brilliantly with feta somehow. And that's it, just a super simple assembly of summer goodness. Salty and sweet, superb. Ever since I started doing these recipes with ZOE, I've been super excited to show you a little bit of fermentation. At the heart of it, of course, is cabbage, as with so many krauts, but it's got some wonderful extra ingredients and some fabulous spices. Overall, it's a 10-plant ferment, and it really will give you a golden glow. One thing we do have to do is weigh our ingredients carefully, because that's what tells us how much salt to put in. I'm going to start with a big ingredient, cabbage. I'm looking for 1.5 kilos of vegetables overall. I'm going to take a few of these thick, chunky spines from the bigger leaves to put in my bits and bobs bowl for a super easy ferment that I'm going to show you after this. That is just over a kilo of cabbage. So I now need half a kilo of my other ingredients, my roots and my aromatics. Like me, you were probably told that carrots help you see in the dark. Well, they definitely help your vision. They're absolutely rammed full of vitamin A, and that's really good for keeping our eyes healthy. I have to keep my eyes on the box grater, or there'll be some fingers in this kraut. No surprises where these nubbles are going, into the bits and bobs bowl. This is a swede from my garden, and this is a kohlrabi grown by our lovely neighbours at Trill Farm. They're both members of the cabbage family, slightly different flavours, rooty, not leafy, but they're both going to be great in this kraut. I haven't peeled these guys, I've given them a good scrub. There's actually loads of nutrients in the skin and some beneficial bacteria which will really help kickstart the ferment. I'm going to pause with the big roots there because now I want to make sure I get in enough of my super aromatic roots, fresh turmeric and ginger. Again, no need to peel them. There's lots of goodness and nutrients in the skin. I've scrubbed them clean. You do need to be super careful when you're grating turmeric because it's quite brittle. You might notice I'm pushing much less hard. I have a tendency to break and then suddenly you're grating your fingers. The combined weight of the ginger and the turmeric has taken me up to 1,480 grams. So I've just got room for 20 more grams. Some of that's going to be in the form of these lovely spice seeds, coriander and cumin, sprinkling it everywhere. I've got a little bit of these two guys left over. You know where they're going. The bits and bobs bowl. Time to do a little bit of maths and then weigh the salt. And I want 2% of the weight of all the shredded veg in salt. So 1,500 grams, 2% of 1,500, I think that's 30 grams. I'm going to go from 1,500 to 1,530. It's important to emphasize that when you're making a ferment, everything needs to be clean. The vegetables clean, skin on is fine, but well scrubbed. Your hands clean, the bowl clean, and your jar clean. Straight from the dishwasher is fine, or sloosh it out with boiling water from the kettle, just to make sure that there's no dodgy bacteria there. I'm just going to scrunch and scrunch. There, look at that. The juice is coming out. That liquid is the brine that's going to pickle these vegetables, but it's not added water. It's all come from the vegetables themselves, which is lovely. And that's what you can do when you shred everything nice and fine for a kraut like this. And I'll do this by squeezing a small-ish ball at a time, just dropping it into the jar. That exactly 1.5 kilos of vegetables and a little bit of salt fits into a 1.5 litre jar with perfection. All I need now is to put my weight, which is a super clean beach pebble that just fits neatly in the top of the jar, scrubbed and dishwashed and blanched in boiling water. I've taken the rubber seal off this because I don't want to seal it completely. I want a little bit of air to escape as the fermentation starts. Gas coming up and it sort of burps and bubbles a little bit. That's all good. That tells you that the fermentation is happening. I'm just going to seal it, but it won't be airtight. Once it gets going, a little bit of that liquid tends to fall down the side of a jar. So I'll always put it on a plate to catch the drips. There's a lot of satisfaction in preparing a kraut by the classic method of shredding, grating and squeezing the vegetables with the salt. But there is a super simple alternative to making some lovely ferments for you to enjoy at home without so much of the hassle. The secret is to pre-make a brine, and it needs to be a 4% brine. I'm going to make 500 ml, half a litre. That's 20 grams of salt. Just sprinkle that in on my digital scale. I do want a little bit of boiling water just to dissolve the salt. So I'm just putting a splash of boiling water from the kettle until my salt's dissolved in the bottom of the jar. This is lovely cold water from the tap to 500 ml, half a litre. This is my bits and bobs bowl, remember? Things that I've accumulated, edges and knobby ends from the various vegetables I've used in the other recipes. Plus these beautiful green beans from the garden, the cubed carrots, kohlrabi, the courgette ends. This fermentation method using a 4% brine is sometimes called a lactoferment. That's the scientific description of the fermentation process, because it's lactic acid that starts reacting with the bacteria in the vegetables. Look at that, filling it absolutely to the brim. If it even spills over a tiny bit, I don't mind. Super simple. Make the brine, pour it over the veg, stick a lid on, and you're good to go. You can smell when that fermentation is getting there. It's slightly pungent, might be a bit of a shock at first, but it's a good, clean, pungent smell. You'll see the fermentation starting to happen, little bubbles appearing. And once that's happening, every day or so, just take the lid off and you'll hear a little sound. That's the gases being released. Just unscrew it for a bit and screw it back on. That's called burping your ferment, and it just stops it building up too much pressure. Very unusual for a jar to explode, but that's a good safety measure just to release the gases. In a regular kitchen at room temperature, 10 to 15 days. Once you've made a gorgeous kraut like this golden glow, people then wonder, how do you actually eat the stuff? Well, the answer is however you like. I often put some on the table with a meal, whatever we're having. You can use it almost like a condiment. You can use it as a topping on cheese and crackers, or one of my favorites, with poached eggs on toast. So just be adventurous, have a bit of fun, and you'll get an awful lot of goodness from your golden glow. I've really enjoyed showing you 4 of my favourite ways to celebrate the finest ingredients and most fantastic flavours of the summer. All these recipes are in the caption below, or you can get them on your ZOE app. I do hope you'll give them a go, and I'd love to hear how you get on. Now I need to have a little snack. What's it going to be? Where do I start?